Thank you for joining us today, and a Happy New Year to all of you. This is Bill Baker at Firestorm, welcoming you to this co-sponsored and underwritten RENWEB Firestorm presentation of why test plans. I have to wrap my tongue around my tooth there to get that one. All participants today, as always, are on mute. If you have questions during the presentation, please use the built-in question facility within the GoToWebinar program, and we will attempt to answer them during the webinar, or if not, then we will get to you individually to answer any questions. You may follow us on Firestorm Solutions at Twitter and Firestorm Solutions at Facebook. We invite you, the hashtag for this session is #CrisisCoach. As you know, Firestorm transfers crisis into value, and we empower you to manage your risk and crises. Firestorm has expertise in crisis management, critical decision support, crisis communications, and consequence management, among other kind of things that you might need for your school or your organization. Our attorneys like us to present this disclaimer. Keep in mind this presentation is not complete without the accompanying oral comments and discussion. Any work product provided by Firestorm must be read in conjunction with guidance given by national, regional, local authorities, as well as your company's personal counsel, your schools or your organization's counsel. Moreover, this information, it should not be interpreted as legal advice or legal opinion. We're pleased to have RENWEB as the underwriter of this series. This is the Crisis Coach webinar series. This is number 4 in the series. If you've missed any of them, you can watch previous webinars at firestorm.com, and you can register there for future webinars as well. Today we'll be discussing why test plans. Our moderator today from RENWEB is Ginger Reed. She's the Director of Product Management in the RENWEB University. Ginger, would you like to take over here and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about RENWEB?
Thank you. I appreciate this opportunity, and RENWEB is very excited to partner with Firestorm. We met Jim and his team back this summer at our Power Conference, and it's just been a very beneficial relationship from a RENWEB perspective for our customers, because we not only want to be your database management company, but we also want to provide you some tools to make your campus safe, to make your campus a better place for your families to grow. So without further ado, I do want to turn it over to Jim, and he's going to talk to you guys about your test plans and why you should test. I shouldn't say your test plans, because they should be your real plans, right, Jim? But why you should test those plans to keep your facility safe and in a welcoming learning environment for those children. So, Jim, thank you very much for partnering with us on this webinar series, and we'll turn it over to you.
Thanks. Between you, me, and Bill, I think we're all not ready for the new year.
No.
And maybe it's the cold weather. I hope everyone that's listening has their school in session and being able to get off to 2014 to a good start. My name's Jim Satterfield. I'm the president and founder of Firestorm, and we're certainly glad to share with you. We are very fortunate that RENWEB is underwriting this webinar series and sharing the information, and I know that everyone on the call today is a RENWEB user and has seen the benefit of that. I would point out that there are certain key features already in the RENWEB software that can be significant assets to you. One is the documentation of rights of who can pick up a child after school and being able to maintain that information and having it regulated, as well as the notification capabilities that are in it. And we'll be talking about other activities that are available via the RENWEB system. But having your system together and having it operate makes a key differential. And it's being prepared for the educational side and being prepared for those things that can happen from a disaster or a crisis basis. We always start our webinars off with an update of some of the things that we're seeing in the news. I think that unfortunately we have to open with events from late December, the shooting at Littleton School, That's the Arapahoe School in Colorado, where the young man was thrown off the debate team and felt the only way that he could resolve the issue was to come back to school with a shotgun and machetes and lots of ammunition to try to take out the teacher. And he ended up killing a student in the school who was shot as a result of that. Our whole preparedness concept is we want to make sure that interventions happen before those points are reached and to share. Firestorm is working with the Littleton school system and the Arapahoe school and helping resolve that. We're working with another school right now where there was a teacher termination and there were some difficulties as a result of that. So if you are in trouble and you need assistance, don't hesitate to reach out to us. We also are seeing the flu make a surge at this point in time in the year, and it's having large absenteeism rates spread around the country, and certainly some states much more so than others. There was a forecast from one medical group, BioRadar, warning that the swine flu pandemic will hit in 2014. If you haven't updated your communicable illness plan or pandemic plan, I would encourage you to do so because the threats are there. And one of the reasons we talk about communicable illness is it can be different than just a pandemic. You saw the meningitis outbreak at Princeton, and it also affected a school in San Diego with large outbreaks associated with it. So there are a lot of things that can occur around that. And when we think about schools being prepared, we want to expand your horizon beyond just the armed intruder or active shooter scenario. The power outages and the winter storms have affected schools and power and businesses in all of those areas as we're going on and through the year. And so there's really something every single month that we have to focus on to be aware of. So we'll continue to give you the updates as we see new events emerging in these areas, but that's a quick start as we look at 2014. Today we really want to be focusing on preparedness. And emergencies happen. We clearly have seen that all too often, and we want to make sure that you're ready. What do you do? Where do you go? What do you say? What do you need? Those are all the elements that are there. The types of words that you see on the screen are actions and are people that need to be involved in this process. So the first thing is that we want to know that we're ready, and that's really why we test plans. And we test plans for a variety of reasons. And you see those listed on the screen. To identify weaknesses in our plan. Is there a gap, something that we haven't thought of? We've been very fortunate in doing preparedness assessments, self-assessments, with now several hundred schools. And in going through that assessment process, I'm regularly told, well, oh, we learned something. We didn't know that we should do that. Yes, we need to put those things in place. So you test your plans to find out why they're not working and where. We really want to stimulate changes within the school to make sure that activities are done, and that's another reason to test. Maybe you don't have the full buy-in of everybody in your management structure, and this is a good way to do it, and locate errors that are here in the process, and that could be a communications error or some lack of judgment. And it would certainly give you some insights into what's carrying forward. The buy-in that's listed is, again, similar to the changes in the process, and then you really want to take the lessons learned from your test and update your plan. When we talk about preparedness, it's a continuous improvement process. This is not put a plan in a binder. See, Ginger, I'm having trouble talking to today. It's talking about it to become part of the culture here. And so this is a continual improvement process, just as we're doing in our classrooms. How are we getting better consistently as we carry forward? Now, the benefits here are listed on this screen as we talk about it. What we're really trying to do is to make sure that the response can proceed as we predicted it would, as we hoped it would during a crisis or a disaster. We want to familiarize everybody with what the vulnerabilities, the impacts, the plans are, and how we make decisions and what we communicate. And we really are focused on identifying problems and weaknesses. We're not upset when a plan fails in a test. We actually would prefer that so that we can update that and make the necessary and appropriate changes as we go forward. And just like with any other test, when you're doing it in a classroom, you gain the experience to prove insights and then the lessons learned to get better and better. So it's this continuous cycle here as we're focused on the benefits. Now, in a crisis, most everything we learn in the first 24 hours is wrong. And that's the reason why we want to make sure that the plans tell us not only what to do, but how to do it. And the testing of those plans leads us through that process. Now, the focus of these things are that when we do it, at each step of the way, under whatever type of a test that we run, we want to focus on what's changed, what's different now. What is it that we know? And you'll notice here the phrasing, what is it that you know? Because it's not what you think, it's what you know. We have to make decisions based upon the facts, because many times what we learn initially in those first 24 hours is wrong, as the previous slide had said. So the process here becomes very, very critical. So going through the exercise focuses the participants to identify what's changed, what do they know, what are they concerned about, and then what is their plan? What are you going to do? And so following the Firestorm predict, plan, perform methodology, you would do that at each step along the way to figure out what's going to be happening next, establishing what your plan is, and then performing and executing on that plan while you're monitoring, because things are going to continue to change. And so what it is you monitor and how you monitor that becomes very, very important. And in some cases, we're monitoring a derivative as opposed to the actual event. And we can talk about that as it goes on. And then lastly, what's the message? What are we going to communicate to the students, to the parents, to the public, to our faculty and staff? What are we going to be sending out at those points along the way? So when you do an exercise, the 7 things that are listed here become the very clear focus of the participants as we go through that process. Now, the purpose of it, and we're covering a lot of the background here, because this is part of the reason you want to do more than a fire drill, pre-announced and set up. And by the way, if you're not doing unannounced tests, your plans are not going to be as thoroughly exercised. Testing for an armed intruder outside of the building, an armed intruder inside of the building, an armed intruder while you still have people outside at recess or on the sports field. There's different strategies at each point along the way and how you would carry forward. So the exercise purpose is to allow management, the principal, the head of school, the president, the heads of each one of the departments, to use and assess the plans and procedures to determine if they're feasible and determine whether they'll work under actual conditions. Because if the plan doesn't work well in the exercise, it's not going to work well when you really need it to, when seconds really matter. We want to assess and measure the degree to which the personnel understand the emergency response functions. And personnel here, I want you to think about that, not only the faculty, not only the teachers, not only the admin staff, but the students. Do they understand their role and their function? And we want to enhance the coordination and communication among everybody that's involved and identify areas for improvement. It's okay to have a problem in an exercise. In fact, if all of your exercises work perfectly, you probably are not exercising the right thing. And finally, you want to increase everyone's ability to respond when those events come together. Now, the scope and objectives, we're not trying to upset your normal business function, the normal class day or school day, but we want to start developing a series of exercises so that you gradually increase the complexity and level of participation. In the past, historically, many of you have done just fire drills, or you might have done a lockdown drill. But planning those and making them a little more complex and a little more complex and a little more complex will raise the element of response that you receive from each of your individuals. You want to look at a variety of management and response to the various exercises that are going forward. Uncover the inadequacies. Consider deviating from the test script to do an interjection. If you're doing an exercise and you've told everybody we're going to do this, and then you suddenly do something a little different in it, it'll be interesting for you to watch. Are they able to adapt to the new change in plans? Again, all of our planning around these areas, we follow a rule we call HR Rule 1, 2, 3. You want to be 3 deep at every particular position. So if a person has the primary responsibility in the middle of the exercise, you might make this person unavailable. Maybe they were injured in whatever occurred. Maybe they were out sick that day. So that someone else has to assume that responsibility as the backup in order to carry forward. Always before you do an exercise, you want to make it clear what the objectives and goals are. And this is a kind of a no-fault event. And we'll show you an actual case study in just a few minutes of how an exercise is formatted to show you what the goals and objectives of a specific one look like. Now, the exercise expectations should always be realistic. We're not going to try to focus on meteorites landing or zombie scenarios that are coming in, but we want to have a realistic one. It's a generic scenario, and it can be of an event that could happen in your area. I was on the phone with a school in Arkansas today, and I don't think in Arkansas we're going to be worried about a tsunami. So we're not going to try to focus on that. We want to focus on things that they would be subjected to, whether it's a weather-related event or whether it's a man-made related event or a violence event. You do not want to make them too complex initially. My recommendation is start simple and then carry it forward in that period of time. Now, in most of the events, you're going to find that the scenarios will cover more than a one-day period. And you can compress that if you want to take a block of time and cover a few days. But, for example, the shooting in Littleton took 80 seconds. 80 seconds. 1 minute, 20 seconds, and it was over. But obviously the consequences from that event have lasted for weeks and weeks, and will change that school forever going forward. So as you look at this, it's going to be adapting around the consequence management aspects that come together. Now, we can focus on more than one threat in an exercise. It can combine 2 or 3 different scenarios. And for example, we're finding many of the armed intruder scenarios, they're throwing the fire alarm in addition, so you've got a fire mixed in with an armed intruder scenario. So we could combine multiple events that would come together. And what you're really looking for is how we handle the emergency response, how we escalate, and how we notify and get that information out. Many of you have schools that don't have a paging system that connects all buildings, both internally and externally. That's going to make it a more complex situation for you, and whether you need a bullhorn to identify that. An exercise could clearly show you that we cannot communicate with everyone the way that we need to, and would be another aspect. And then making sure that we have the return to normal operations as we carry forward. Now, there are many different types of exercises, and we're going to talk about 5. And the first is the low-key one. It's just a briefing or a walkthrough of the plans, giving an overview of doing it. This would be very good with the new staff at the start of the school year as you're bringing them in. You can do it, and just a cycle time to do this would take you an hour to an hour and a half to be able to walk through and orient someone to the plan. And you could be asking questions, what if this happened or that, as it would come through. So that's the lowest level of an exercise. The second would be a drill. Test the response. And you would think of it like a fire drill would be a good example. And this could be very short, 10 minutes or up to an hour, tornado, those types of things. Planning cycle, you would want to think it through, have everything orchestrated. And if you're doing this type of a drill in any of these areas, like an armed intruder or a tornado or a fire, You might consider teaming with your local fire department or your local police or sheriff's department to go through the exercise to have them provide you feedback into the process. The most common one done is the third of this series, and that's the tabletop. That's a simulation scenario. You'd have your faculty sitting there, your crisis management team that's going to be structured, and do a tabletop where we show this is what's occurring, give them a series of cycles that they would go through, or escalations, if you will, answering questions and planning. To lay this out, it'll take you a couple of months to sort of pull your plan together. The test time could run anywhere from 1.5 hours to 2 hours. By the way, we find that if you go over 2 hours, you're going to lose some of the effectiveness of it. So my recommendation is that these types of tabletop exercises, you could actually go as short as 1 hour. But the 1.5 hours to 2 hours is really the best window. And then you want to allow for a debriefing afterwards, where you'll be asking what went well, what didn't go well, what did you learn from this, what did you want to know that you didn't know. But I would encourage you to focus on this is probably one of the areas that you really want to plan and do. From a standards and best practices standpoint, the minimum requirement is annual testing. I would recommend that in a school environment, you consider doing this once a quarter, to take a different aspect or a different scenario, and at a minimum, you'd want to do it twice a year. The next one would be a functional, a limited involvement or simulation by field operations to test communications, preparedness, the availability and deployment of operational resources. This could be a larger scale event in conjunction with your local fire, police, or paramedics. This would be a good one to carry together and look at your reunification plan. How are we going to get our students back to their parents? Because if there is a crisis that's occurred at your school and you send a notification out through the RENWEB system, and if you tell parents don't come, they will read that with how quickly can you get here. So where are you going to direct parents to pick up children after the event if your main building was damaged or caught into a fire or there were other activities? Where would you go? What would you do? How would you know that you were getting the right child to the right parent? Where are the rendezvous points? Where are these elements were put together? And so this is a much more complex type of a scenario. And then finally, the full-scale event. This is a larger simulation. I would say that either the one just before this functional or this full-scale, at most I would only do one of those in a year, and I would do either or, not both in the same year. But it's much more of an interactive one where you have a complexity carrying forward, and again, utilizing the first responders in your community would be an excellent way to bring those together. Now, once it's done, once you've done whatever one of these 5 different types of exercises, you want to follow up. You want to review and evaluate what you did. How did the test go? What did we learn? You want to give feedback to everyone that's involved within it. Review the lessons learned from the test, and then go and carry those lessons learned back to your plans to fill the gaps that you've identified and created. You want to get feedback from everybody that was there, the students, the teachers, everyone, so that you're focused on giving a full report. But since we're dealing with private schools and independent schools in our call today, I would encourage you to give a report back to the board to let them know that you have conducted the exercise, and here's what we found, and here's what we did, because they have a governance responsibility to see that those things are being done, and this would be a good report. Also, look at the note there. It says, note issues of command, control, coordination, and communications. What worked well and what didn't work well. Those, we see loss of command, loss of control, loss of coordination, and failure in communications in crises on a regular basis. So that's why doing these test exercises can make a significant change. So as we go forward, you analyze it, you do an assessment of whether you completed? Did you address the objectives that you laid out for it? Was it a valid test? What kind of corrective actions to address the problems? You can create a form where you ask questions around these, give that to the people who attended the exercise and participated in it. Then you'd have their written description of what you needed to carry forward so that you could do the modifications and whatever their recommendations are about future test exercises. Because if it failed this time and you made a change, we now want to do another test to validate that the change has taken effect, that you've resolved the problem that came up within it. Now, I'm going to show you a couple of different case study exercises. These are not in a school environment, and I did that intentionally to get you to think a little bit out of the box as we're going forward. And in a future webinar, if you'd like, we can focus on a specific school exercise. But as we're going forward, I'm sure my computer will move forward with it. Let's go here, computer. There we go. We're going to assume an exercise event. Now, you'll notice that we said always there should be objectives. For this particular exercise, we wanted to validate the understanding of the monitoring crisis in that crisis, identify the impacts on employees, customers, senior management, board members, or the public at each phase. Now, if we were doing this for a school, it'd be the students, the parents, etc. Understand the communications process and the content. How are we going to communicate? What are we trying to say? Determine how we adjust our crisis response and our recovery strategies, and define opportunities to improve our crisis management and continuity of operations plan. Your school, as you're thinking about your preparedness plan, we want to separate the incident response from the crisis management decisions from the recovery decisions. Those are three distinct different functions that will be carried forward. Now, the assumptions are you want to respond based upon your own understanding. Make the best decision that you can, and there is no predetermined solutions to the exercise. It's very important when you're doing this with your school, with your faculty, with your staff and your students, that this is an opportunity for them to make the best decision possible, and that we're not going to feel bad if they make a mistake. We'll correct it. So now you've set the stage. You've given the objectives. You've told them what the assumptions and instructions are, and we now give them some goals. Understand how they're going to interrelate, understand the importance, gain insight, assess the overall, and use the plan. You would give them a copy of the plan, and they'd have access to it. So in this example, we showed a description of the company, its head count, operating, the number on site, key factors, some of the basic pictures associated with it, and a layout. And then you start with a series of updates. Now, in this situation, you would then carry forward, and we had the description of the event. So at noon, the alarm sound. Uncertain origin. There's confusion. 911 is called by multiple parties. At 12:01, sprinklers are triggered. People are seen running. Reports vary on description, location, severity. Security is notified to dispatch to the building. More escalation. Confusions continue. Activity is centered on the warehouse area. People are running and crying. Phone videos of confusion and panic shared. More escalation. A bomb blast mentioned in text messages. So you'd stop the exercise at this point in a tabletop environment, asking people, what do they know? Are they concerned? If so, about what? What's their plan? What are they going to monitor? What are they going to communicate? And if you're doing this, my recommendation is if you've got people sitting around a conference table or in a planning area, you would tell us one thing you know. Tell me one thing you're concerned about. Tell me one thing you would do. Tell me one thing you would monitor. What's one message that you would send out? So you'd let each person give one thing they know until you get all the points brought back up in understanding. That's pulling all the participants into the exercise so they all own a part of what's carrying on and being done. And you'd have this discussion. This discussion could last on the scenario that I just said anywhere from 5 minutes to 15 minutes as you talked about it in more detail. Then once you finish the first phase, then you go to the second phase, and there'd be an update. And in the update, Here's an example. At 12:04, 911 is called. The fire and police are dispatched. More reports of confusion in industry. Confusion, notice to evacuate the building. Screams heard. Security arrives. Debris and widespread damage. Injured seen by security. Paramedics dispatched. Lab isolated by security chaos. So you would now, in the discussion, say, what's changed? We've got injured people. We've got all these other activities going. And again, going around and having each person who's involved in the exercise tell you one thing. And so when that person says something, go to the next, and go to the next, so that it is a group commitment as the situation is reviewed and understood to be able to carry through the exercise. So this is an example of a series of escalations that would be happening, and you would be able to design an exercise that would have 4 or 5 phases. In real life, all these things are happening quickly. We're breaking it down into distinct phases so that everyone can look at the facts that they know to understand those decisions. Now, the example that I just gave you from a company, to modify that for a school would be very simple. Imagine a fire that occurred in a chemistry lab, or some other type of event that would have occurred, adding some of the other elements in, and now you've got those escalations that you can see that would come together. So we also, where they were general, we can make the conversation much more specific. You know, let me go back to this slide. High level, what's changed? What do you know? Are you concerned? If so, about what? What's your plan? What do you monitor? Versus, I'll look back too far here. Versus these questions that are much more direct. Are the employees trained for this type of emergency? Which employees? Does your site emergency plan include active shooter response? Which departments have a role? How do you control the access to the site? Who's responsible? Do you have shelter in place or evacuate? Who makes the decision? Should you deactivate card readers, i.e. no access? Which department handles? How do you manage employees? So this level of questions obviously is much more tailored to the exercise that's been done. So in going back, here they're high level conversation. Here it's very, very pointed. If you're going to be building this to the course of the year, and we talked about getting more complex as we went on, if you remember from an earlier part of our conversation today, this is at a high level. This is very detailed. You wouldn't start on this level of detail. You'd start at that higher level first, and then at the second or the third exercise, we'd start to emerge and coming to this level. But they're exactly parallel in terms of what we're thinking about and how we would carry forward associated with it. So now we're going to create a different scenario. It's a little different one to talk about how decisions are made within a crisis. Again, I chose specifically one today that was not a school exercise, and we would certainly be glad to work with your school to design an exercise to fit your environment and area. Here's one with a background. This is a leading manufacturer. By the way, this is a real case that occurred. We just changed the names here. It's a leading furniture producer for the home as well as the hospitality and healthcare industries. Annual sales over $2 billion. It has 350 galleries and stores, and is North America's largest single brand retailer. Boy, I'm sorry, Ginger and Bill, it looks like I have that same speaking problem today. The majority of XYZ's product mix is upholstery, unlike the majority of the competitors in the furniture industry. The major component product in the upholstery is polyurethane foam. Polyurethane foam requires a large volume of storage space and as a result shipped on a just-in-time basis. Therefore, inventories are very minimal. Each division has a different mixture that they use. So here's the update. Key supplier of the foam notifies that they can only provide half the normal amount of product due to a shortage in TDI. That's the chemical used to make it. All of the 4 of the nation's TDI suppliers communicated that due to the effects of recent hurricanes, they've had to declare force majeure, a condition which allows the companies to depart from the strict terms of their contract because of the event can't be reasonably controlled. As a result, they're limiting the amount of TDI they're shipping. XY, the petroleum supplier notifies that it's sustained damage at one of its plants as a result of a tornado and will significantly impact their results for the fourth quarter. They only have a minimum inventory of the product. Now, as you go through, we would ask again here, what's the issue, what do you know, how do you know it, and what is it carrying forward? This exercise was designed to show a supply chain failure. So if I were to ask you, who are the critical vendors for your school, and what would happen if they could not provide you the services that they normally do, how would your school operate? This would be an example of carrying it forward. And then when we start to talk about doing a debrief after an exercise, and we gave the requirement early on today that that's one of the things we wanted to know. Did it test the plan? Did it reveal any weaknesses? What tasks must you complete? What are your 3 top priorities? And one of the things that I think you want to do is to, as you sit around that table, as you're going through the exercise, getting everybody to say, here's one thing that we should do as a result of this. If they won't start with 3, start with 1. Just tell me one thing that we would do different as a result of this exercise. One thing that we've learned that would make a real difference here, and to carry it forward. And we're always focused on impacts. What is the impact of this particular event? And making sure that everybody understands it. Having worked with Virginia Tech after the shootings there a number of years ago, no one wants to be in a position that Dr. Charles Steger was in. And that's where he had to pick up the phone and call 32 homes and say, your loved one's not going to come home tonight. That's not a call that I want any of you ever to have to make. Those are not situations that we want to have to address. The tragedy of Sandy Hook, the mass volume at Virginia Tech, but it was just as tough from Arapahoe School where one family learned that their 17-year-old daughter wouldn't be coming home. That's an environment that we find ourselves in today. So as we focus on this, we want to look at predict, plan, perform. Predict what the vulnerabilities and threats are, what's the plan, and how do we perform. So today as we focus on it, you need to know where your plans are relative to standards and best practices and benchmark against other schools. Because of the underwriting from RENWEB and what we're doing together, we can provide you with a self-assessment of your existing preparedness plans within your school. We divide it into a number of areas, asking questions in each one of those. There are 9 areas, and we're asking approximately 5 questions in each area, 5 data points, and allow you to determine where you are relative to those standards and best practices. And then you get a call after the assessment with a findings report giving you a scoring by dimension and overall, as well as some suggestions and recommendations of what you need to do, and a benchmark of where your school is relative to other schools across the country. This $2,500 assessment is done at no cost to you, courtesy of the underwriting from RENWEB. So we're very pleased to have this relationship with RENWEB, and it's another part of the value that your selection of RENWEB brings to you as we carry forward. We are very thankful for RENWEB for doing this, and hopefully you're finding the information helpful. The Power Conference that's coming up later this year in Atlanta with RENWEB, if there's some areas that you would like to hear discussed, or more of a case study, or maybe more of a sample exercise, or other areas that you'd like to participate in, let Ginger know and your contact at RENWEB what you'd like to see, and we'll work on that together, pointing to that conference later this year. I think that this is a great opportunity for us all to grow together. We were fortunate enough to participate in the last conference in Dallas, and I got to meet many of you face-to-face, and you've been very kind over the phone to share that you've already been putting into place some of the things that we discussed. So as we wind up, we may have a few minutes left here today to do some questions. So I wanted to see, Bill, if you would look to see if any questions have come up via the toolbar on the upper right-hand side. We'll try to answer those. If not, we're going to let everybody get ready to get back in gear and get classes dismissed later today and get everyone headed back home. So, Bill, do we have any questions?
We do not have any questions reported. So if someone has something, please do it quick. Oh, here comes one. How do you handle many suggestions from the tabletop exercises?
The first thing you would do in the tabletop is to have someone serve as a scribe, that they're catching all of the information and all of the suggestions that are coming up. We wouldn't want to criticize the suggestion at that point. We want to be in this data gathering area. Once you've gotten all of your questions, then you want to sit back down with your crisis management team and evaluate those one at a time. Do they make sense? Is there a gap here as a result of it? Is this a training problem? Is this a gap or a failure in our plans? Is it a coordination issue? Is it a monitoring issue? Is it a communications issue? And now if we're going to make a change, what is the change that we want to make? And we've stressed this many times in our previous webinars. You want to make sure that all of your plans tell people how to do something versus just telling them merely what to do. This difference between how and what becomes one of the key failure areas that we're focused on. So you collect everything in the hot wash, that's the conversation or the debrief that occurs at the end of the exercise, then put together a time to go through and evaluate, and there's one more step, and that last step is to go back and then give feedback to everyone about what we learned in the exercise, what changes that we've done, then update plans and do training. Training, 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 training. Because when this happens, you do not want to have someone have to think on their feet. You want them to know what needs to be done and then execute directly on those activities as we carry that forward. So, Bill, do we have another question?
We don't, but I'd like to make one comment along this line. We invite you all to go to firestorm.com, and we have a series of white papers that are on that site, and you can download them. One of them you may want to do is the hot wash, and another is the one on why test plans. There's a wealth of information available on our firestorm.com site. By the way, if you have not downloaded the Disaster Ready People book yet, please do that as well. Another question came in. You recommend tabletop exercises for all teachers together, they're a K through 12 school, or break them up?
I think I might split that group because of the differences in the age of the children and the level of supervision and response that were needed. Older children will be a little bit more aware of the process. Younger children, you're trying to reassure as we move through the process. But the more frequent the tests are done with the children themselves, then the more they're going to respond to the leadership that will be carried forward. If you have a small school doing the testing, the tabletop exercise with everyone together, you could certainly do that. What you might want to do is mix it up. As we talked about doing one of these once a quarter, you might do a combined one in one quarter and then separate them in the other 2 quarters during the school year. Because this needs to become a part of your culture and who you are and what you do and how you carry it forward.
Okay.
I think we...
So do you recommend tabletop exercises with the children?
We've not done it with children yet. There's not a reason not to. But I think sitting down and having a discussion, even with elementary school children, to talk about if this occurs, this is what we want to do. And it's more that walk-through conversation, that lowest level that we gave. Remember, we gave 5 levels of exercise. I would do with the children that lowest level first and do a walk-through and talk about here's what's going to happen and here's what we're going to do and how we're going to do it. When I'm talking with children, I slow my speech. I speak quietly. We're not trying to alarm. We're trying to educate and carry that forward and to move forward. So, Bill, I think we've covered our topic today, and we've spent our 45 minutes together. We're very excited about this opportunity, and we'll be doing another webinar next month for the RENWEB users. All of the webinars are recorded and available at firestorm.com/RENWEB. I would encourage you to go there and listen to the earlier webinars, or if there are individuals within your school that missed today, you can have them log in, and they will get to hear and see what you saw today, or if you have additional questions, to go back through that area. We're going to make every effort to reach out to everyone on today's call to see if there are any individual questions that we can answer. We look forward to sharing with you in the future. This is, in fact, a continuous improvement process. We think that it's important that you focus in your school in this area, and we have some exciting new things that we'll be sharing with you in the coming days. So thank you again. Thank you, RENWEB, for what you've done and what you do every day in our schools, and thank you all for what you're doing for our children. Have a wonderful day. That concludes today's webinar. Goodbye.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.